On a brisk winter afternoon, the Capitoline Hill feels colder than usual. A fig seller balances her basket as she squeezes through a packed crowd. Everyone is here to see a tribune re-elected. The air smells of wool and sweat. Men shout across the steps. Boys climb statues for a better view. Roman politics have always been combative, but the knife has always stayed sheathed. A sentiment Appian later captured when he remarked that no sword had ever been brought into an assembly, and no Roman had killed another Roman in one. That sentiment, however, was about to change. At the front of the assembly stands Tiberius Gracchus, a young nobleman wrapped in a plain toga. He raises his hand to his head, perhaps signaling his friends to protect him, perhaps just wiping sweat away. On the steps above, Publius Scipio Nasica, Rome's chief priest and Tiberius's cousin, is livid. In his mind, Rome is sliding towards tyranny. A tribune is about to seize a second term and, as rumors say, a crown. Nasica pulls his toga over his head like a priest preparing for sacrifice and shouts a chilling call. "Whoever cares for the laws, follow me." Senators and their clients surge forward, wielding legs torn from benches, clubs, and even fragments of stools. The fig seller's basket crashes to the ground. She sees Tiberius knocked down, disappearing beneath a rain of blows. She hears the sickening crack of wood on bone. She smells panic and iron. Moments later, bodies, dozens, perhaps hundreds, are dragged away and thrown into the river Tiber. Rome's political landscape has just shifted. A republic that prided itself on compromise has improvised a murder weapon from the leg of a chair. Thank you for watching Critical Scrolls. This is Rome's first experiment with political murder. On a quieter road north of Rome, a legionary named Lucius trudges home after years campaigning in Spain. The wars have stretched from Iberia to Africa to Greece. Campaigns that once fit between spring sowing and autumn harvest now drag on for years. Lucius's calloused hands have gripped a sword more often than a plow. When he reaches his small farm, he finds weeds tangled over his field and a neighbor's boundary stones pushed deep into his land. Spain's hills may have yielded no plunder, but they cost him his livelihood. Lacking cash to pay debts or to buy seed, he sells what little he has to an eager profiteer and heads home in search of work. In the hills of Etruria, a farmer named Marius faces a similar fate. A bad harvest forces him to borrow grain. When the loan comes due, his patrons demand his land. The law says each citizen may hold up to 500 jugera of public land, but wealthy landowners found ways to circumvent that limit, using their influence to accumulate adjacent plots. Marius, squeezed by debt and patronage, loses his small holding and takes his family to the city. There, he joins a swelling class of proletarii, citizens counted only by the head with no property and little hope. Back in the countryside, an enslaved Greek named Nicias cracks his whip. He's an overseer on a latifundium, a sprawling estate where thousands of jugera of public land have been stitched together into one vast plantation. Rome's conquests have flooded Italy with captives. Wealthy elites buy them by the cartload. Appian later complained that certain powerful men came to cultivate huge tracts rather than single estates, and that the multiplication of slaves coincided with a decline in the Italian people. Nicias keeps the slaves moving, chained when necessary. He is a slave himself, yet he wields a whip that enforces this brutal new agriculture. Far from Rome's ideal of virtuous yeomen, latifundia thrive on dispossession and forced labor. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Appian painted this as a crisis of land and virtue. Plutarch recalled a law limiting ownership to 500 acres, but noted that the rich dodged it, and that displaced farmers ceased to serve in war or educate their children, while Italy swarmed with workhouses full of foreign-born slaves. Appian lamented that the wealthy cultivated vast tracts with slaves so that the race of slaves multiplied throughout the country, while free Italians dwindled. Modern historians disagree on the scale of the problem. Some think demographic pressures and a post-war baby boom subdivided farms and pushed surplus sons into the cities, not just greedy landlords. Whatever the cause, contemporaries like Lucius and Manius see only that Rome's victories have hollowed out the citizen farmer class. They are the human faces of an empire that measures success in provinces but fails its own people. Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus was no outsider. He was the son of a celebrated consul and Cornelia, daughter of Scipio Africanus. His upbringing was steeped in stories of virtue, yet as a young quaestor in 137 BC, he negotiated a humiliating peace in Spain only to see the state renounce it. On the road through Etruria, he observed deserted farms and shepherds who were foreign slaves. These experiences convinced him that something was deeply wrong. In 133 BC, at around 30 years old, Tiberius was elected tribune of the plebs, one of 10 officials empowered to protect ordinary citizens. The tribunate was sacrosanct. Tribunes could propose laws, veto any public act, and shut down government functions. Legally, they were untouchable. Tiberius understood that the tribune's power did not come from written statutes. Rome had no written constitution. Instead, power came from mos Maiorum, the unwritten customs of the ancestors. By pushing those customs, he could redraw the boundaries of politics. The Lex Sempronia Agraria he'd proposed had three main points. First, it enforced the long-ignored limit of 500 jugera per individual, and, crucially, allowed an additional 250 jugera per son, so that a family might lawfully hold up to 1,000 jugera. Second, a land commission of 3 men, Tiberius himself, his younger brother Gaius, and his father-in-law Appius Claudius Pulcher, would measure holdings and redistribute public land to poor citizens. Recipients would receive secure, hereditary plots. Third, money to fund the new farms would come from the treasure of King Attalus III of Pergamum, who had died without an heir and willed his kingdom to Rome. Tiberius proposed using this treasure to support his agrarian reforms. All these measures were legal under Roman law, but they sidestepped the Senate's traditional control over finances and foreign affairs. Tiberius initially offered compensation to large landholders, but the measure threatened powerful interests. Marcus Octavius, another tribune and a large landholder, announced he would veto the bill. Under custom, a tribune's veto could stall legislation for a year. Ordinarily, the dispute would be referred to the Senate. When the Senate refused to act, Tiberius escalated. He bypassed the Senate entirely and took the bill straight to the plebeian assembly, breaching the understanding that the sedent's auctoritas should be respected. When Octavius repeatedly vetoed, Tiberius invoked a radical idea. Since the people elected tribunes, they could also depose one. The assembly voted to strip Octavius of his office, and he was dragged from the speaker's platform. This violated the sacrosanctity of a tribune and set a precedent that one tribune could be removed for opposing another. With Octavius gone, the Lex Sempronia Agraria passed. The commission then began its work. But Tiberius's actions had deeply alarmed the Senate. He had flouted most Maiorum, concentrated power in his own hands and those of his relatives, and used foreign wealth without senatorial oversight. Fearing prosecution when his year ended, he made another unprecedented move. He campaigned for a second consecutive tribunate. To his supporters, he was defending the poor. To his enemies, he was rehearsing tyranny. Modern scholars debate his motives. Some, noting his rhetoric, the wild beasts of Italy have their dens and hiding places, but the men who fought and died for Italy have no place to rest. See a principled reformer responding to genuine hardship. Others argue he misdiagnosed the problem, pointing to evidence that population pressures, rather than latifundia, drove economic distress. Whatever his intentions, Tiberius was breaking rules that Romans considered sacrosanct. In the year 133 BC, he would learn how brittle those rules were. The harvest season of 133 BC sent many rural supporters back to their farms, leaving Tiberius short of voters. Rumors spread that he sought a crown. In that tense atmosphere, Tiberius convened an assembly on the Capitoline Hill to renew his office. The fig seller from our opening came to listen, hoping for cheap grain and a plot of land. Nicias, the enslaved overseer, had escorted some of his master's slaves to the city. He watched from the edges. Lucius and Manius, now part of Rome's urban crowd, stood among the plebeians, anxious and excited. As the voting stalls were being arranged, opponents claimed that seeking consecutive office violated custom and alleged that Tiberius aimed at kingship. Senators and their clients gathered nervously nearby. Massacre, the Pontifex Maximus and a cousin of Tiberius, could not tolerate further delay. Covering his head as if conducting a ritual, he called on senators to defend the Republic. They armed themselves with whatever was at hand, clubs, sticks, and the legs of benches, and stormed out. On the Capitoline steps, chaos erupted. The fig seller saw Nasica's followers charge. Lucius heard Tiberius shout for help and gestured toward his head. Supporters thought he was asking them to defend him. Enemies thought he was calling for a diadem. Nasica's men swung their improvised weapons. Tiberius stumbled and fell as he was clubbed to death. Bodies piled around him, and perhaps 200 or 300 men died. The mob dragged corpses to the river and dumped them unburied. This was not a judicial execution. No decree of the Senate authorized it. It was a lynching disguised as piety. Appian marked the moment. Before Tiberius, he wrote, internal discord in Rome had not led to bloodshed. There had been disagreements and strikes, but weapons were never used in the assembly. Tiberius was the first victim of civil unrest. Many others died with him. In killing a tribune, Nasica's faction shattered the taboo against violence in politics. It was an extraordinary escalation, yet it happened with chair legs and stones because Rome lacked mechanisms to resolve deep conflicts. In one afternoon, centuries of custom gave way to naked force. The Republic did not collapse overnight. The Land Commission continued its work for a time. Rome still governed its empire, minted coins, and held elections, but the repertoire of accepted political tools had expanded. Senators now knew that a rival could be killed with impunity if enough supporters deemed it necessary. Within a decade, Tiberius's younger brother Gaius would also die at the hands of a political mob, along with thousands of his supporters. Later reformers, like Saturninus and Lucius Appuleius Saturninus, would meet similar fates. Ambitious generals such as Marius and Sulla would raise armies against fellow citizens. street gangs under Clodius and Milo would brawl openly. Ultimately, Julius Caesar would cross the Rubicon with his legions, proving that power now flowed from soldiers more than from the Senate. The underlying tensions never really disappeared. Rome's expansion kept delivering land and slaves to the wealthy, deepening inequality. The ager publicus was still carved up by those with influence. Demographic pressures, military demands, and the lure of urban life continued to erode the old classes of smallholders. Modern scholars argue about whether the latifundia were the root cause or a symptom, but no one doubts that Rome chose property over deeper reform. Rather than address structural inequalities, the state sanctioned, or at least tolerated, violence. For the fig seller, Lucius, Manius, and Nicias, the events of 133 left scars. The fig seller returned to the forum to hear Gaius Gracchus speak, only to watch another tribune die years later. Lucius and Manius never received land. They joined the urban masses clamoring for grain. Nicias eventually saw his master's estate confiscated by another generation of reformers. Massacre slipped away to Asia disgraced and died in exile. Tiberius himself became a martyr, a symbol invoked by later populares and condemned by conservatives. The law he championed lived on in fragments, but the example he set, of breaking unwritten rules to right perceived wrongs, proved infectious. Rome's first experiment with political murder reminds us how quickly a stable system can unravel when its norms are ignored. The Republic still had centuries to live, but after 133 BC, violence was always an option. When citizens feel that the state no longer protects them, when elites refuse to compromise, when reformers bend the rules to fix a broken system, and reactionaries respond with clubs, a republic can twist into something unrecognizable. Tiberius Gracchus forced Romans to answer a painful question. What kind of republic kills one of its own leaders to avoid sharing land? It's a question that still echoes whenever societies choose between reform and repression. This was Rome's first experiment with political murder. It would not be its last. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more explorations of power, inequality, and the choices that shape civilizations. Thanks for watching Critical Scrolls. Until next time.